Hi everybody. Welcome to our first video about Much Ado About Nothing, which is one of, I think, Shakespeare's best comedies. To dive in, we have the major characters, Beatrice and Benedick, Claudio and Hero, and then everybody else is kind of a supporting character. You have Beatrice and Benedick, who are exes who have this flirting, fighting thing going on throughout the play, and they have genuine feelings beneath all this sort of back and forth. And we'll see those feelings come out occasionally. And that's what makes their story so satisfying. They're also really fun, passionate characters. Then you have the young lovers, Claudio and Hero, and this is their first love. And their story could be Romeo and Juliet, but they're both a little bit older and a little bit wiser, and they have Beatrice and Benedick in their corner, and so everybody comes out okay in the end. So, the nice thing about this being a comedy is that nobody dies. Okay? We're we'll get into some consent issues, but nobody dies. So, we're going to start out with Act 1. And Act 1 is all about meeting our characters, talking about their relationships with each other and setting that up for the audience, and setting up what are going to be our major plot points. Scene 1 is the longest scene. Scene 2 is like half a page, and scene 3 is like 2 pages. It's though they're very short and they're basically conversations. Something you should pay attention to throughout the play, and we'll talk about it more again as we get into Acts 3 and 4, is that this is all about what do people say about each other, what do they overhear, what assumptions do they make about what they overheard, and how do they create drama with each other. Because the title, Much Ado About Nothing, could be called Conflama Drama Llama. This is all about people having beef and people having drama and people misunderstanding relationships and everything. All right, so let's dive in. In scene 1, like I said, you have the introduction of all your major characters. It starts with Leonato, who is a rich landowner, receiving a letter via messenger that the Duke of Messina, Don Pedro of Aragon, is coming to Messina. Sorry, got that a little mixed up. Messina is where Leonato lives. Don Pedro is the Duke of Aragon. He's been away winning a war, and he and his soldiers are coming back through, and they're going to stay with Leonato in Messina. And in as he's reading this letter and talking to the messenger, and the Don Pedro's on his way, we also get the introduction of Hero, Leonato's daughter. I know Hero sounds like a guy's name, but here it's a girl. And Beatrice, who's Leonato's niece, who lives with them. And we see that Beatrice has some beef and history with this guy called Benedick. And Benedick is one of the soldiers in Don Pedro's army. And we don't really know why she doesn't like him, but we know that she has a history. And she teases him and she's like being insulting about him to the messenger. And finally, the messenger's like, "Look, I wouldn't mess with you, lady." And everybody else is like, "That's a good idea. Don't mess with Beatrice." So then Don Pedro shows up almost immediately and he greets Leonato and Leonato greets him and they're just really friendly to each other. This is a prince who's really well liked, and he's welcome to Leonato's house, and they say really complimentary things about Leonato's daughter Hero. You kind of get the impression that maybe Leonato would like her to marry Don Pedro, but nothing's outright said. It's just sort of like there in the background. And Benedick and Beatrice come face to face for the very first time in the play and have a war of words where they go back and forth, teasing each other, but also fighting, but also kind of flirting. It's a lot of fun, but at the end of it, Benedict dips out, basically, and Beatrice is genuinely hurt. And we're going to see that throughout the play. So kind of pay attention to those moments where she actually shows, or when Benedict actually shows, real feeling behind all the sort of the facade they've put up in front of themselves. Now, Leonardo welcomes everybody to come into his house, and everybody follows, except Claudio, who's one of the other soldiers, and Benedict. Claudio is kind of like Benedict's best friend for the week. Apparently, Benedict has a new best friend every 5 minutes, and Claudio is the current one. And on Wednesdays, they wear pink. Anyway, um, so Claudio's like, hey, did you see that girl Hero? And Benedict's like, yeah, what about her? Well, what do you think about her? She's fine. She's not my type, but she's fine. Are you fooling around? No, no, what do you really think? She's fine. I mean, she's not as beautiful as Beatrice, but then Beatrice is like hell on toast for a personality. So, And it turns out, of course, Claudio has basically fallen in love at first sight with Hero. Because he wasn't really interested in having relationships before he went away to war. He was focused on being a good soldier. But now that he's back and everybody's relaxed and everybody's happy and the conflict's over, he has the attention for relationships. So he asks Benedict for his opinion, and he kind of asks Benedict to, like, be his wingman. So, Don Pedro comes back and says, like, why are you guys back here? Everybody else is in the house. And Benedict immediately tells on Claudio. Uh, and then Don Pedro's like, oh, if you really like her, I'll help you get her. Because if I talk to her dad for you, he'll definitely say yes. Because, first of all, it's the prince. And secondly, Leonardo and Don Pedro have a really good relationship. So, I'll give up any claim I had on her. He doesn't really, but, there was kind of that expectation in the background, like we said. And you can have her. You notice no one asks Hero what she wants? But it's going to be okay because actually Hero's about Claudio too, so it's going to be fine. But nobody asks her opinion here. Anyway, um, Claudio is all surprised that Don Pedro is going to be his wingman, but he's excited and he's happy, and they all agree to do it. Okay. Then they both tease Benedict because he's never going to fall in love with a girl. He's like, I'm never going to be in love again. I did that once. I made a fool of myself. It's never going to happen again. And they're like, one day we're going to see you in love. All right. Foreshadowing, right? Keep that in the back of your brain. Um, and in the meantime, they're all going to go to Leonardo's. There's going to be dinner. There's going to be a party. They're all going to have a good time. All right. Now, when we get to scene 2, we have Leonardo and his brother, Antonio. They're back in the castle. Antonio is coming to Leonardo and saying, hey, my servant told me that he overheard Don Pedro say to Claudio that he's going to ask your daughter to marry him. Well, obviously, we know, right, that Don Pedro's going to ask Hero to marry Claudio. But that's not what Leonardo and Antonio are hearing, right? So this is like third-hand gossip, and it's kind of wrong. And Leonardo says, okay, we won't make any plans for now, but if he asks, she better say yes. So we're already getting the themes of the play, right? Gossip, rumors, people telling other people what to do with their romantic relationships, people plotting and planning. Okay, so that's a super short scene. Then they're getting ready for the party. Then we get into scene 3. Now, everybody else is at dinner and the party, but Conrad and Don John aren't. And Conrad basically comes in and says, like, why aren't you partying with everybody else? And Don John talks about being depressed. being sad, being melancholy, and that he doesn't like partying with everybody. It's not his scene, which, fair enough. I'm with you there, Don John, right? And he says that he doesn't enjoy happiness. He doesn't enjoy jokes. He doesn't enjoy any of that. He has to laugh when he feels happy, and um, eat when he's hungry, and he shouldn't have to obey anybody else or what anybody else wants. Which sounds fine until you realize part of this is coming from the fact that his brother, his half brother, is the prince and will eventually be the king and is going to inherit everything. And Don John, as the bastard, the illegitimate son, does not have any claim to any of that power, right? Because he's born out of wedlock. So the fact that he's like even allowed to hang out, he's legitimized in that way, but he doesn't have any claim to that power. So some of this I don't want to participate business is just his natural thing, and we can understand that. But some is because he's so jealous of Don Pedro. He can't even stand to be near him. And it isn't his fault, right? Circumstances of your birth are not your fault, but it's his life and he's got to cope. And so he's going to be our villain. And this is where his motivation lies. And he has this great speech in Act 1, Scene 3, line 25, where he says, I had rather be a canker in a hedge than a rose in his grace. He's talking about his brother. And it better fits my blood to be disdained of all than to fashion a carriage to rob love from any. In this, though I cannot be said to be a flattering honest man, it must not be denied that I am a plain dealing villain. I am trusted with a muzzle, and enfranchised with a clog. That's like an ankle chain. Therefore, I have decreed not to sing in my cage. If I had my mouth, I would bite. If I had my liberty, I would do my liking. In the meantime, let me be what I am and seek not to alter me. So he's just coming out and saying, I'm a villain. That's who I am. If I didn't have to be under my brother's yoke, I would bite. I would ruin things. I would, because I want to. So he's our villain of the piece. His motivation is basically he wants to mess things up for his brother as much as possible in any way he can because he's angry and frustrated and jealous. Now in comes Baraccio with news that Leonardo is planning to help Claudio get married to Hero. So Baraccio also overheard this, and he's bringing the news to Don John. And Don John says, ha 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 ha, something I can screw up. So he's absolutely determined to mess up this wedding in any way that he can, just to make life difficult for Don Pedro. And that's where our Act 1 ends. So, short, sweet, to the point, introduction of all the characters, all the major relationships, and a start of the plot line of Scooby-Doo evil, basically. All right, so things to pay attention to when you do your notes. And you're going to do notes on each of your major characters. So, Leonardo, Don John, Don Pedro, be careful, don't mix those guys up, right? Benedict, Beatrice, Claudio, and Hero. That should be 7. Yes, those are your characters who you're going to pay attention to. So, set your notes up, one per page, one character per page, and just jot down what did we learn about each of those characters in Act 1 so far. What are their relationships to each other? What are their motivations? What are they thinking, feeling, planning to do? Who's helping who? Who's against who? We already got a lot set up here. All right, and then I'll see you back here for Act 2. Until then, bye everybody.